It was a bright afternoon in the small African village of Lanturi, where the sun dipped low behind the acacia trees, and children's laughter echoed through the dusty schoolyard. Among the children was a quiet girl named Mara, known for her shy smile and her habit of clutching her small red notebook everywhere she went. The bell rang, marking the end of another school day, and one by one, children were collected by their parents, guardians, and older siblings. But Mara's parents, who were often too busy arguing about money and gossiping about neighbors, didn't come. She waited on the wooden bench outside the classroom, tracing circles with her toes in the sand, watching the sky turn from gold to crimson. The teacher, Miss Nyanda, locked up the school and assumed everyone had gone home. She didn't notice the small figure still sitting under the old tree near the gate. Hours passed, and the evening wind began to blow cold. Mara tried to be brave, whispering stories to herself from her notebook. But fear started creeping in as shadows stretched long across the empty schoolyard. When the night fell, the gates creaked, and the sounds of crickets filled the air. Somewhere deep in the village, a strange drumbeat echoed, not from any celebration, but from the forest beyond. Mara stood up, hugging her bag, and looked toward the dark path. Her heart thudded as she began walking alone. But after a few steps, she heard something, soft footsteps behind her, then a whisper that wasn't human. She turned around, her breath caught in her throat, and saw glowing eyes watching her from behind the school fence. She froze. The eyes blinked slowly, then disappeared into the shadows. Mara ran, her slippers slapping the ground, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know that the spirit of the forgotten ones, souls of children once left behind, roamed that very path at night, searching for company. The drums grew louder as she ran toward the forest edge, where a faint light flickered as if calling her name. Mara, come. The voice was soft, familiar, like her mother's, yet strange and hollow. Exhausted and scared, she stumbled into the forest, her red notebook falling to the ground. By the time her parents realized she wasn't home, it was too late. The village night watch searched the road, calling her name, but only the wind answered. Inside the forest, under a large tree marked with ancient carvings, a soft cry echoed once, then silence followed. The spirit of the forgotten child had been awakened once more. The moon was rising high over Lanturi when Mara stepped deeper into the forest, her little feet trembling on the cold ground. The air was thick, filled with the scent of damp leaves and the distant hum of night insects. She could still hear her name being whispered, soft, almost like a song carried by the wind. Her heart wanted to believe it was her mother calling her, but something in that voice was wrong. It echoed too many times, too slowly, as if more than one mouth repeated her name in unison. Mara. She clutched her school bag tight, eyes darting between the trees that seemed to move closer with every step. In the distance, a dim light shimmered, flickering like a lantern. She followed it, whispering prayers her grandmother once taught her, old words in the village tongue meant to keep evil spirits away. But with every prayer, the forest grew louder, as if mocking her faith. Suddenly, the ground beneath her foot cracked. She had stepped on something hollow. Bending down, she saw old bones buried under the roots, small like a child's. Her breath caught. Her grandmother had once told her about the forgotten ones, spirits of children abandoned by careless parents, trapped forever in the forest. They waited for others like them, lost, scared, and alone to join their eternal play. A low humming sound began around her, voices laughing softly, children's laughter mixed with sobs. Mara turned around and saw faint figures appearing, small glowing shapes moving between the trees. Eyes bright, but faces empty. "Come play with us," one whispered in her ear. She screamed and ran, tripping over vines, scraping her knees, until she reached a clearing where a tall woman in white stood by the river. The woman had no feet. Her gown floated above the ground, her hair long and silver, eyes kind but hollow. "Why do you cry, little one?" the spirit asked, her voice both warm and distant. "Are your parents not coming?" Mara nodded weakly, tears glistening on her cheeks. "They forgot me," she whispered. The spirit smiled sadly. "Then you belong with us now. We never forget each other." Before Mara could move, the woman raised her hand, and mist began to form around them. Faces appeared within the fog, dozens of children, some smiling, some crying, all with the same glowing eyes she had seen before. "No," Mara screamed, clutching her red notebook to her chest. The pages flew open, and as the wind turned them, one page tore off and landed in the river. The spirit's gaze followed it, her face suddenly changing, as if the notebook held power she didn't expect. The whispers grew louder. "Leave her. She's still remembered." The ghostly voices hissed. The spirit stepped back, her white gown rippling like smoke. "Go, child," she said softly, fading away. "Before they take you." Mara didn't wait. She ran, her heart pounding, her notebook clutched tight. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to get out before dawn. Behind her, the laughter turned to cries, the forest groaning like it was alive. She could see faint light through the trees, maybe the road, maybe home, but she didn't know that something else had begun following her. Something that wasn't a spirit, but something older, darker, and very much awake. Mara stumbled through the thick forest, her tiny hands trembling as she clutched her red notebook. Her school uniform was torn, her knees were bleeding, and fear pressed against her chest like a stone. Every tree looked the same, every path twisted back on itself. But the light she had seen earlier still flickered faintly ahead, a small lantern swinging as if someone was waiting for her. She followed it, whispering softly to herself, "Papa will come." But her voice cracked midway, lost in the cool, whispering wind. The lantern light grew brighter until she could see a small hut made of old wood and palm leaves standing in a clearing. Smoke rose from a tiny fire, and an old woman sat beside it, her back bent, her face hidden behind a colorful scarf. Mara hesitated, her instincts torn between fear and hope. "Child, come closer," the woman said, without turning her head. "You shouldn't be alone here." Her voice was warm yet strange, too calm for the dark forest that surrounded them. Mara slowly stepped forward. "I got lost," she said softly. "My parents forgot me at school." The woman nodded slowly, still facing the fire. "Ah, careless hearts breed lonely children," she murmured. "But you are lucky, little one. The forest doesn't forget easily." Mara frowned, confused. The forest. The woman finally turned her head, revealing eyes that were black, not dark brown, not shadowed, but pure black, reflecting no light. The forest remembers every cry, every footstep, every tear. It remembers those who are forgotten, and it welcomes them. Mara stepped back, fear rising again. The woman's lips curled into a soft, haunting smile. "Don't run, child," she said gently. "The others will find you if you do." Mara didn't wait. She turned and bolted into the trees again, but this time the forest felt alive. Branches moved like arms, roots slithered under her feet. The light behind her vanished, and the sound of soft laughter echoed from all directions. Then she heard footsteps, not light ones like before, but heavy, dragging steps. Something large was following her. She hid behind a fallen log, pressing her hand against her mouth. The forest went silent. A shadow passed by, tall and twisted, its body shaped like a man, but its face hidden under a mask made of leaves and bones. It sniffed the air like an animal, growling lowly. Mara's heart pounded so hard she thought it would give her away. The creature stopped and turned toward the log, its black mask glinting faintly in the moonlight. Then silence. The creature vanished into the mist. Mara waited several minutes before standing up, her legs weak. She could still feel its presence somewhere behind her. Clutching her notebook, she whispered, "Grandmother, help me," remembering the bedtime stories her grandma told her about ancient spirits of protection. A small breeze brushed her cheek, warm and gentle, and for the first time since nightfall, she didn't feel alone. Somewhere, a soft humming started, the same lullaby her grandmother used to sing. It guided her through the trees until she saw faint lights in the distance again, but this time, they weren't from a spirit or a hut. It was the village. She ran toward it, tripping, gasping, crying. Yet as she reached the edge of the forest, she glanced back and saw the shadow standing between the trees, watching her. It didn't follow. It only lifted one hand and pointed toward her red notebook, then slowly melted into the darkness. Mara burst out of the forest just as the first streaks of dawn touched the sky. Her small feet were coated in mud, her uniform torn, and her face streaked with tears and dust. The villagers were already waking, lighting fires for morning meals, when they saw the terrified girl stumble into the open. "It's Mara," someone shouted, and soon a few women ran to her, wrapping her in a shawl, trying to calm her trembling body. But Mara didn't speak. Her eyes were fixed on the tree line, where the shadows still seemed to move, though the sun had begun to rise. Her parents came rushing soon after, faces pale and guilty, their voices breaking as they called her name. "Mara, oh my child, forgive us," her mother cried, falling to her knees. But Mara didn't hug her. She only whispered, "Why did you forget me?" before fainting in her father's arms. The next day, she woke up in her grandmother's hut, wrapped in warm blankets. Her grandmother, old and wise, sat by her side, humming softly. "You have walked through the whispering woods, child," she said, her wrinkled hand stroking Mara's hair. "Few who enter come back whole." Mara looked around for her red notebook. It was lying beside her, open to a page she had never written. The words scrawled there weren't hers. They read, "The forest remembers." Her grandmother's face changed when she saw it. "Did you write this, Mara?" she asked. The little girl shook her head. "It wrote by itself," she whispered. The old woman sighed deeply. "Then it has chosen you." That night, while her parents slept outside the hut, arguing in low voices about what had happened, Mara's grandmother told her an old story. Long ago, when the village was young, careless parents often left their children alone while chasing wealth and gossip. The spirits of those abandoned children gathered in the forest, angry and lonely, forming what was known as the Forgotten Ones. to keep them away. An elder once created a notebook, a sacred charm, binding their names within its pages to give them peace. But when that elder died, the book was lost. Until now. Your red notebook is not just for writing stories, her grandmother said softly. It carries name souls of the forgotten. And when you were left behind, the forest remembered that pain. Mara's eyes widened. So the voices I heard, the glowing eyes, were children like you, the old woman finished, trapped between memory and sorrow. Mara hugged the notebook tightly. Can I help them? She asked. The grandmother looked toward the forest beyond the village. Perhaps, but you must be careful. The forest does not release easily what it has claimed. That night, when everyone slept, Mara woke to a familiar humming, the same lullaby her grandmother used to sing. Only now, it came from the notebook. She opened it, and her breath caught. The pages glowed faintly, names appearing one after another, each written in shimmering light. Suddenly, the last page flipped open by itself, revealing a blank space that pulsed like a heartbeat. Then, slowly, new words began to form. You were never forgotten. Mara's eyes filled with tears. The air in the hut grew cold, and the flame of the oil lamp flickered. A whisper brushed her ear, thank you. Then silence. When her grandmother woke at dawn, she found Mara asleep, clutching the notebook. But when she tried to open it, the pages were blank, again except for one faint line at the very end. The forest remembers the forgotten. But now, one child remembers for all. Outside, the forest stood still and silent. But those who passed near it swore they heard soft laughter echoing through the trees, not haunting, but peaceful. 3 days passed, and Mara seemed quiet to quiet. Her parents believed the nightmare had faded, but her grandmother knew better. Every night, she would find the red notebook glowing faintly beside Mara's bed, though the girl swore she hadn't opened it. The villagers began whispering that something was wrong with the child, that she brought strange winds and restless dreams wherever she went. Even animals avoided the path near her house. But Mara didn't care about their stares. She had started hearing the voices again, not as whispers this time, but as songs, soft, sorrowful tunes that carried her name through the wind. One evening, as the crimson sun dipped low, she sat near the old well behind her grandmother's hut, tracing her fingers over the notebook's cover. It suddenly felt warm, pulsing like a heartbeat. When she opened it, she saw a drawing she didn't remember making, a map of the forest, marked with a single red X. Below it, a message appeared: "Free us before the moon fades." Her breath trembled. She remembered what her grandmother said: the forest doesn't release easily what it claims. Still, she felt she had to go. As night fell, she slipped out quietly, holding a lantern and the notebook. The forest looked different this time, calmer, almost expectant. The wind rustled the leaves like soft murmurs of welcome. As she followed the map, faint figures appeared in the mist, children of all ages, translucent, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Their faces were sad but peaceful. "Are you the one?" a little boy's voice asked from behind her. She turned, and there stood a child no older than 6, his eyes shimmering with tears. "You heard us," he said. "We've waited so long, I don't know what to do," Mara whispered, clutching the notebook. The boy pointed toward the clearing with the large tree carved with ancient symbols. "It began here," he said softly. "The elder trapped our names there, but the forest took them back. As she approached the tree, the ground beneath her feet vibrated, and the air thickened with whispers. She knelt and placed the notebook against the roots. The pages flipped on their own, glowing brighter than ever. The wind rose into a howl, and dozens of glowing shapes surrounded her, circling like fireflies. "Say our names," they chanted. Mara's eyes widened as names began appearing on the pages: Abeni, Kojo, Lindy, Teo, hundreds of them. Her voice shook, but she began reading them aloud, one by one. Each name she spoke released a faint light that rose into the sky, vanishing like a shooting star. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she continued until her voice grew hoarse. When the last name appeared, the wind suddenly stopped. The forest went silent, and the glow faded. The notebook snapped shut with a loud thud. Then the boy smiled. "You remembered us," he said. "Now we can rest." One by one, the spirits dissolved into sparkles of light until only the boy remained. He looked at her sadly. "But the forest is not done, Mara. It remembers everything, even pain. Be careful what you carry." With that, he too vanished, leaving her alone under the ancient tree. Mara stood still, trembling, her heart heavy but peaceful. The forest no longer felt frightening. It was quiet, like it was finally asleep. When she turned to leave, she noticed something carved into the tree trunk, her own name glowing faintly. It faded slowly until only the bark remained. The notebook in her hand was no longer warm. Its glow had gone out, but something inside her had changed. She wasn't the same little girl who had been forgotten at school. She was now the keeper of memories, the one who remembered the forgotten. The morning after Mara freed the forgotten spirits, the whole village woke to an eerie calm. The forest, which had always murmured with rustling leaves and the hum of insects, was completely still. Even the birds refused to sing. Mara sat quietly by her grandmother's hut, her red notebook closed tightly in her lap. Her parents, who once ignored her, hovered nearby with guilt and confusion, not knowing how to comfort her. They didn't understand what she had done in the forest, or what it had cost her. Her grandmother, however, did. "You disturbed what was sleeping," she told Mara softly, stirring a pot of herbs over the fire. "The forgotten ones are free now, but something else has awakened with them." That night, Mara dreamed again. She stood at the edge of the same forest, only now it was alive, breathing. The trees pulsed like lungs, inhaling and exhaling clouds of mist. From deep within, a faint heartbeat echoed, and the voice of the spirit woman, the one in white, whispered, "You opened the door, little one. Now it cannot be closed." Mara woke up gasping, the notebook glowing beside her once again. She flipped it open, and her hands trembled. The pages that had been blank were now filled with moving drawings, roots spreading, trees twisting, faces hidden in the bark. One message stood out in the middle of the page: "We are grateful, but the forest hungers." She ran to her grandmother's hut, tears in her eyes. "Nana, it's alive. The forest is alive." The old woman's face grew pale. "Then it has chosen its keeper too soon," she murmured. "Every soul you freed left a space behind, a space the forest wants to fill." Mara's parents, overhearing, dismissed it as nonsense. "You're filling her head with stories," her father snapped. "She needs rest." But that night, the forest began to whisper again, not softly this time, but in deep, shuddering waves that reached the village. Trees swayed, though there was no wind, and the river that ran past the edge turned dark and still. People woke, screaming from dreams of glowing children and twisting roots. By dawn, the villagers gathered, terrified. "It's the girl," one woman cried. "The child brought this curse." Her parents stood in shock, unable to defend her, but her grandmother stepped forward, eyes burning with ancient strength. "You fools," she shouted. "It's your neglect that fed the forest. Every forgotten child, every ignored cry, she only gave them peace. You made them restless." Silence fell. Then, from behind the huts, a low groan echoed, a sound like wood bending under pressure. Everyone turned to see a large tree that hadn't been there before, its bark cracked open like flesh. From within, faint whispers leaked out. Mara stepped forward, clutching the notebook. "It wants me," she said softly. Her grandmother shook her head, tears in her eyes. "No, child. It remembers you. That's different." As the villagers watched in fear, Mara walked toward the tree, opening her notebook once again. The pages fluttered wildly, stopping on one with her own name written in red ink. "The forest remembers everything," she whispered. "Even those who hurt me." Then, as if in answer, the roots of the great tree began to move slowly, then faster, spreading across the ground like veins, touching the feet of her parents, the villagers, and the huts. But instead of swallowing them, the roots glowed faintly, pulsing with light. The whispers softened, turning into gentle laughter, and the forest stilled again. When the light faded, Mara collapsed, the notebook falling beside her, blank once more. Her grandmother rushed to her, lifting her tiny body. Mara's breathing was steady, her face calm. The forest had accepted her offering, not as a sacrifice, but as its guardian. From that day forward, the people of Lonturi stopped forgetting their children. For the forest had eyes now, the eyes of a girl who had once been forgotten, but remembered everyone. The village of Lonturi never forgot that night when the forest came alive. Days turned into weeks, yet the story of the little girl who calmed the spirits was whispered in every home. Children were warned never to wander alone, and parents prayed more often, leaving offerings at the forest's edge. But no one dared to enter again except Mara. She had changed. Her eyes, once filled with childish innocence, now carried the weight of something ancient. She could hear things no one else could, the sighs of trees, the whispers of rivers, even the heartbeat of the earth beneath her feet. Her grandmother, though proud, feared what the girl was becoming. "The forest marked you, my child," she said one morning, her wrinkled hand tracing the small green mark that had appeared on Mara's wrist. "It listens through you now." Mara nodded quietly. "It only speaks when people forget," she replied. "When someone is left behind, I feel it." That very day, a cry echoed through the village. A small boy named Jabari had gone missing while fetching water. Panic erupted. The villagers searched the fields and the paths near the river, but he was nowhere to be found. When night began to fall, they came to Mara's hut, desperate. "You found the lost before," one woman begged. "Help us." Mara didn't answer immediately. She looked at the forest, which seemed to shimmer faintly under the moonlight, as if breathing again. Taking her red notebook, she walked toward it. Her grandmother tried to stop her, but Mara only smiled softly. "It won't harm me," she whispered. "It remembers me." The villagers followed at a distance, torches flickering in their hands. As she entered the forest, the air grew colder, but not hostile. The trees leaned closer, whispering secrets. Mera opened her notebook, and the pages began to move by themselves, stopping on one that showed a faint drawing, a riverbank and a crying child. She followed the image, guided by the sounds that only she could hear, a mix of sobs and lullabies. When she reached the river, she saw Jabari sitting on the other side, shivering and crying, unable to cross. "Don't be afraid," Mera called softly. The boy looked up, his face streaked with tears. "They left me," he sobbed. Mera nodded. "I know. But the forest never leaves anyone alone." She placed her notebook on the ground, and as she whispered words, only the trees seemed to understand. The roots near the river began to move, forming a bridge of twisted wood and vines. The boy hesitated, then stepped onto it, walking slowly toward her. When he reached her, Mera hugged him, and the bridge dissolved back into the earth. Behind her, the villagers gasped, witnessing the miracle. "She's blessed," one whispered. "No," her grandmother corrected, stepping forward with tears in her eyes. "She's bound." From that day on, whenever a child went missing, the villagers didn't search the forest themselves. They called Mera. And each time she entered, the forest seemed to grow quieter, calmer, as if soothed by her presence. The children she brought back always said the same thing. "The trees told her where I was." Years passed, and Mera grew into a young woman, wise and gentle. The mark on her wrist glowed faintly whenever someone was in danger. The villagers began calling her the guardian of Lanturi. But deep inside, Mera knew her bond was not one of power, but of memory. Every time she helped a child, she heard faint laughter in the wind, the laughter of those forgotten souls she had freed. They were still with her, guiding her, reminding her why she could never truly leave. And though she smiled for her people each night before sleep, she would whisper into her notebook, "Thank you for remembering me." The forest would rustle softly in reply, as if saying, "We never forget." Years passed, and Mera's name became legend in Lanturi. The villagers no longer feared the forest, they respected it. They left food and flowers at its edge, teaching their children to whisper thanks before crossing its paths. Mera, now a young woman, still carried her red notebook everywhere. It was worn and faded, yet alive in its own way. The pages turned by unseen hands when danger was near. And sometimes, on the quietest nights, faint songs would drift from it, the lullabies of spirits long freed. But peace is never eternal. One dry season, a group of strangers arrived from a distant city. They came with axes, saws, and plans to cut down part of the forest to build a road. The villagers protested, but the men laughed. "It's just trees," their leader said. "Superstition won't stop progress." Mera stood before them, calm yet firm. "If you touch that forest, it will remember you," she warned. They mocked her, calling her the forest witch, and marched ahead. The villagers watched helplessly as the men began cutting the first trees. The sound of steel biting into wood echoed through the valley. But before the second tree could fall, the earth trembled. A low rumble spread beneath their feet. The air grew thick, and the sky darkened, as if dusk had come early. From the heart of the forest, a voice rose, not human, not animal, but vast, ancient, and sorrowful. "You learned nothing." The men froze, their faces pale. Roots burst from the ground, twisting around their axes, pulling them away. The trees groaned, bending like giants, waking from slumber. The leader shouted orders, but his voice was drowned by the wind that carried thousands of whispers, the voices of children, women, and elders long gone. They didn't scream. They remembered. The villagers fell to their knees, crying out prayers. Mara stepped forward, opening her red notebook. The pages flew wildly in the storm, glowing with golden light. She shouted into the wind they didn't know. "Forgive them," the forest roared back. "Will you carry them too, child of remembrance?" Mara's heart pounded. She looked at the terrified strangers, then back at the trees swaying like waves. "Yes," she said. "I'll remember them." The storm stopped. Silence fell. The forest stilled once more, its rage dissolving into calm. The men dropped to their knees, trembling, realizing what they had nearly destroyed. When Mara looked down, her notebook had changed. Its pages were now blank, except for a single line on the last page. "The forest forgives through those who remember." From that day on, no one dared to harm the trees of Lanturi again. The outsiders left, telling tales of a girl who spoke to the forest and made it obey. But Mara knew the truth. It wasn't obedience, it was trust. Years later, when Mara grew old and her hair turned silver like moonlight, she still visited the forest every dawn. The villagers often saw her sitting beneath the great ancient tree, whispering softly into her notebook. One morning, she didn't return. They searched and searched until they reached the tree, where they found her red notebook lying open on the roots. Her name written on the last page, glowing faintly before fading away. From that day, whenever a child cried or was lost, the villagers claimed they could hear a gentle voice in the wind saying, "Don't be afraid, you are remembered." The forest had gained a new guardian, one who had never stopped caring. The trees swayed softly when children laughed, and when someone passed by, forgetting to give thanks. A warm breeze brushed their cheek, as if reminding them of the promise. Mara's story became legend, told across generations as the tale of the girl who remembered. And deep in the heart of the forest, beneath the same tree that once whispered her name, the earth hummed quietly, alive with memory. The forest no longer hungered. It remembered, and through Mara, it forgave.